Hello viewers, welcome to this lecture in the plant groups. I shall be talking about lichens today. Lichen is not a single plant. It is a unique association between algae and fungi. The algae is providing the photosynthetic food and that sugar is being provided to fungi, and on the other hand, the fungi is absorbing nutrients and making it available to the algae. The objectives of today's lecture are to know about the lichen morphology and the different types of lichen, to learn about their internal structure, that is anatomy, to know about their reproduction, and of course, to have a brief idea of their ecological significance and different uses and importance of lichen. Now, lichen can be visible to naked eye and they are called macrolichen, or it can be not clearly visible, they will just appear as a patch on a piece of rock and they are called microlichen. And this microlichen, the details can only be understood when they are observed under the microscope. Very commonly, lichen can be considered as moss, but actually speaking, they are not moss, because moss is a group of plant belonging to the group called bryophytes. So, lichen accordingly is termed as an association, but common name may be reindeer moss, which is Cladonia rangiferina, which is a common food for reindeer because it grows in the polar region in the North Pole. And it also has the Iceland moss, which is Cetraria islandica. Both of them are called moss, but they are not actually mosses, though they provide protein-rich food for the animals like reindeer. Now, lichen actually is cosmopolitan. It can grow in different altitude from sea level to high alpine vegetation, and hence they can grow on any particular surface. Lichens can very commonly grow on bark. They can grow on rock in the form of crust and they are called crustose lichen. Sometimes lichen can grow as an epiphyte, that is, they are growing on a plant surface but they do not procure the nourishment from the plant. Instead, they prepare their own food because they have the algal counterpart. Lichen can also grow in the soil crust and it can also grow in the poles in ice. Lichen is growing in sand, in desert condition, high extreme temperature, and sometimes if there is a crack inside a rock, it can grow inside the crack, and this is called endolithic lichen. And very strangely, the photosynthetic component actually will be surfacing while the non-photosynthetic component remain inside the rock. Sometimes there are some arctic species like the Rhizocarpum geographicum, which is very old. It can be up to 8,600 years old, and this is considered as map lichen and is considered to be one of the oldest species or oldest living organism in this world. Now, as I was telling, the lichen can be classified into different types. The first type is fruticose lichen, and it actually is appearing like a multiple branched leafless mini shrub, and they have flattened thallus or leaf-like structure which can be colored because of some pigment. But this is called fruticose because they have fructification which comes from fungi, and they include the Tylocystis, Chrysoplethamus, and this is a very common fruticose lichen. There may be foliose lichen. The name comes from the word leaf, leaf-like lichen. It is a two-dimensional leaf-like structure and they are quite big. And they include the Pseudocyphalaria rainieriensis. Similarly, there may be the crustose lichen. It is so called because it is growing on a rock in the form of a crust. And sometimes it appears like a cracked up crust, like a dry mud flat. And they are also called rhymose or areolate. And it include the Caloplaca marina. Similarly, there may be another type which is called squamulose. Squamulose is nothing but it is leaf-like, but they are later on becoming scaly and crustose-like. And they are basically looking like dry leaves. And it includes the Squamarina cartilaginea. There may be another type which is close to crustose, but it appears like a powdery mass growing on rock, and this is called leprose lichen. And this leprose lichen include the Caloplaca chrysodata. Sometimes the lichen may be gelatinous because they have a gelatinous polysaccharide on the surface, and they normally prevent the lichen from getting desiccated or dried up. And it include the Colema auriforme. Lichen can also be filamentous like the Usnea filipendula. It can also be bisoid, which is wispy, or it appear like a teased wool, mass of wool, and it include the Synogonium. But sometimes apart from this, lichen may also be mixed, which cannot be classified into a specific type. Now, as I was telling that lichen do contain different pigments because they are photosynthetic. Of course, because of the algae, the chlorophyll is a very common pigment. But apart from chlorophyll, there may be different types of carotene and xanthophyll which gives them bright yellow or orange color. And sometimes the color is so prominent that in Yosemite National Park, vast stretch of rock is appeared to be painted, which is not painted actually, but it is the color of lichen that gives color to the rock. Now let us consider the anatomy of lichen. Basically, the anatomy include there are 5 different layers, where 4 layers are very common, but the 5th layer is not always present. And in a foliose lichen, the uppermost layer is actually formed of cortex, which is the outermost tightly woven filamentous fungal mycelia. So the outer layer is fungus. It is followed by an algal mass, which is the photobiont layer containing photosynthesizing green algae. It is followed by a loosely packed hyphae, and it is called the medulla. And following the medulla, there is the basal layer, which is also called the lower cortex. So what we can see that this cortex, upper and lower, both are formed of fungi, and they are sandwiching the intermediate layer of algae. Sometimes there may be an additional layer which is also called the anchoring hyphae or the rhizine, which is basically formed of mycelial aggregate, and they are helping in procuring nourishment from the soil or the substratum. Now let us consider the different forms of algae or the phycobiont or the photobiont of a lichen. They include the Treboxia, which include the round spores or cells. It also includes the Trentifolia. Trentifolia appear as orange because of carotene, but it is a green algae. It will also include the Myrmecia. Myrmecia is also appearing as a round globose mass of chlorophyll. There may be another type of algae, which is the cyanobacteria or the blue-green algae, and this will impart blue-green color to the lichen, and it is also called the acantholichen. And the cyanobacterial counterpart include the nostoc, which is a filamentous blue-green algae, and the cytonema, which is also a filamentous blue-green algae or cyanobacteria, but which is branched. Coming to the mycobiont, which is the fungal counterpart, they are mostly belonging to Ascomycotina, which is having reproductive structure in the form of apothecia. Sometimes they may have perithecia and pseudothecia. And there are 12 different orders, and they are including the Uroshiomycetes or Arthoniomycetes, Leucanomycetes and Lichenomycetes. So they are all belonging to the Ascomycota. Sometimes lichen also may belong to Basidiomycota, and that include the Aphyllophorelis and the Agaricales. And the Agaricales is edible, mind you, and Aphyllophorelis may have the property of trapping insect. There may be also some Deuteromycota. Actually, it is said that 20% of all fungi are lichenicized, and 40% of Ascomycota are becoming lichen. So this is a very interesting information that fungi may form an association with the algae to survive in stringent environmental condition. Now there is a unique symbiosis. As I was telling this symbiotic association is like this, that the algal component will provide food in the form of sugar, and this sugar will be available to the fungi which is below. And sometimes it happens that the fungi, with the help of this hyphae and mycelia, will procure the nourishment from the soil and give it to the algal member so that they can photosynthesize easily. Lichen can grow in extreme condition, and this was actually observed when the lichen was taken and grown in the Mars simulation laboratory, and it continued to survive for 34 days. And this is a particular figure which shows that this lichen, photobiont inside and the mycobiont outside, they do not really suffer much even after growing for 1 month in this Mars type of condition. So that really indicates that lichen can survive without air, without nourishment, because they are actually supplementing each other. That is, the algal and the fungal member are supplementing each other, and they can survive easily. Similarly, another species called the Rhizocarpum geographicum, it was taken in Soyuz rocket and it survived for 15 days. This experiment was conducted in 2005, and this indicates that lichen can grow quite some time even there is no air in the vicinity. Now let us consider the different mode of reproduction. We start with the vegetative or asexual reproduction here. The reproduction is carried out with the help of units of algal spore or algal cell surrounded by hyphae, and this particular structure is called soradium. And the soradium is unique because it is getting separated from that particular parent thallus and it is growing as an independent plant body. Similarly, another unique structure is isidium. Isidium is also a branched filamentous structure with algal colonies inside, which will be separated and producing branch structure and grows into a plant body in no time. There is also another type of spore which is called diaspore. Basically, the diaspore may be present inside soradium or isidium, and they are the reproductive structures which are flagellated and they come out and germinate to produce the lichen plant body. Now let us consider the sexual reproductive nature. As I was telling, the sexual reproduction mostly is carried out by the fungal member, so different structures have been reported which are similar to sexual reproduction of Ascomycota. Like one of them is apothecium. And what is apothecium? Apothecium is actually a structure which is saucer-shaped, and the upper part is having the paraphysis, asci and ascospore, and these ascospores can actually be liberated out. And basically this asci or ascospores are produced from spermogonium, which gradually matures as they come up. Another important structure is perithecium. Perithecium is a flask-shaped structure which is having the ascus and ascospore inside, and they are getting the food supply from the algal member, and sometimes they are embedded in squamules of placidium, and this placidium is a small opening and the entire structure is embedded. So naturally they can survive for a prolonged period even if the condition is very much stringent. And sometimes there is peltula, which is also close to placidium, but it is actually a different lichen family because it is having somewhat embedded apothecium. So what we can see is the apothecium and perithecium are sexually reproductive structure which gets embedded and can serve as resting spore. There is another type of structure which is commonly called pycnidium. Now pycnidium is an asexual spore which is represented by a flask-shaped structure, and inside that flask-shaped structure there will be filamentous hyphae with small aggregate of spore, and this particular structure is found in Phaecia. Sometimes they will not require two separate plant body. A single lichen thallus can be self-fertilizing. That is, they produce the male and the female gamete which can unite and produce a plant body by sexual reproduction, and it is found in Graphis scripta. Now let us consider the different uses of lichen. As I was telling you, lichen is a very important constituent of the environment. This is because the lichen is producing some exudate, and this exudate can be protein, can be polysaccharide, but basically they can chelate to mineral iron. And this metal oxalate which is getting chelated is definitely indicating that there can be some sort of metal leaching by that lichen. Lichen can also include some nitrogen fixing fungal mycelia, and this particular nitrogen is actually getting enriched in the soil and will help the other plant to grow. And sometimes this nitrogen diet is taken up by mollusk like snail, and they defecate and again put back the nitrogen into the soil. Lichen can also help in stabilization or binding of sand dune, so they can act as sand binder. In semi-arid condition, lichen actually they help in maintenance of soil structure, and this is not for one day. This particular lichen record, it has been shown that fossil of lichen can be dated back to 2.2 billion years. So lichen is a very old customer in this world. Lichen can survive in water stress, and this type of stress is called cryptobiosis. Basically, this cryptobiosis meaning they are tolerating high water stress. When they become dry, at least they appear as totally dehydrated, dried thalli. But actually they are not, they are remaining like that, and with the advent of favorable condition, they again germinate to produce normal plant body. Lichen can actually indicate very interesting air pollution. Whenever the sulfur dioxide concentration in the atmosphere increases, there will be some sort of definite color change in the lichen plant body from green to yellow, and this is quite apparent in different leafy lichen or bushy lichen. And whenever this bushy lichen is changing color, we must check that the environment is gradually getting polluted with sort of sulfur dioxide or any other acidic vapor. And when the concentration is increasing, then gradually the lichen is totally getting devastated or getting disappeared from that condition. So lichen definitely indicate air pollution in urban condition. Now, I was telling that lichen can be edible because lichen can be consumed by invertebrate or vertebrate animals, and this lichen include the Cetraria islandica, that is Iceland moss. It include the Viola, that is Bryoria. It include the Cladonia, which is the reindeer moss and which is the staple food for reindeers. But it is not always good, because sometimes lichen may contain usnic acid and vulpinic acid, which are toxic organic compounds, and if their concentration is high in the lichen, that may include food toxicity. A very interesting property of lichen is lichenometry. It is a technique used to determine the age of exposed rock surface based on the size of the lichen thalli. Bessel in 1950, he actually discovered this technique, and it is a very useful technique by which the age of the lichen will determine the age of the rock and is used in paleontology or geomorphology. Lichen was found to be grown in ancient cities, like in the Roman city of Bello Claudia in Spain. It has been shown that the lichen growing on the rock surface, they are capable of degrading polyester resin. So definitely this particular ability indicate that lichen can survive in extreme polluted condition, polluted with heavy metals like lead, copper, or even it can tolerate the radionuclides. A very interesting compound, that is litmus, is produced by lichen. The Rossella tinctoria produces the litmus solution from which we prepared the famous litmus paper, which is denoting acidity and alkalinity, that is, it is turning red in acid and turning blue in alkaline solution. Harris tweed is a brand name in UK, but the color of this tweed comes from different lichen, which is the orange Xanthoria peritina and the grey Parmelia saxatilis. Lichen can also be a very useful tool for producing medicine, like the Peltigera leucoflavia is producing compounds that is curing fungal infection or candida infection, commonly known as thrush. So oral thrush can be cured by Peltigera extract. So thereby we can see that lichen has different types of uses, which can be ecological, which can be geomorphological, or which can be medicinal. Of course, it can be food. So in this particular lecture, what I have tried to discuss is that I have discussed the lichen as a component, the different members of lichen, the anatomy of lichen, the different vegetative, asexual and sexual reproductive features of lichen, and finally I have discussed the importance of lichen. Thank you.